Welcome to a Week 8 edition of the RotoWire College Football Podcast, the Steven Garcia of College Football Podcasts. I am Nick Whalen, joined as always by the Jasper Brinkley to my Casper Brinkley, John McKechnie.
What's going on, man? It's excited to be doing dipping our toes into the video. I dressed up, as you can see, with a great, but I got my Yosef shirt on for App State tonight because they're playing Arkansas State. So
okay.
Had to show out for the
Big,
guys.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a big Sun Belt Fun Belt showdown. So had to represent in kind.
There is far from a dress code on the RotoWire College Football Podcast. I would be offended if you were wearing anything but that. I feel overdressed, frankly, in my flannel here. It's a big week for us, John.
You fit in Boone with the flannel, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, I wanted to throw something on, Badger colors, but, didn't want to lean too far into it with an actual Badger shirt, so I kind of settled in the middle. That brings us into the big news of the week, and this is something that we've been waiting for 8 weeks now. Welcome back to the Big Ten, and to a lesser degree the Mountain West, but mainly the Big Ten. Like I said, this has kind of been, for someone like me in Big Ten country. You're in Big Ten country. You're more of an SEC guy at heart, more of an App State guy at heart. It's been tough it's been nice on one hand, I guess, to watch all of these SEC and Big 12 and ACC games the last few weeks, but kind of having to wait our turn. And finally, we get it, and it comes a day early for me. We get Illinois, Wisconsin on a Friday night, inexplicably. That line is Wisconsin 19.5, down, I think, 4 points from last week when we first talked about it. But Nebraska, Ohio State is on the board this week. We got Michigan, Minnesota, which is, I think, the unquestioned headliner in the Big Ten, due in large part to some lofty expectations for Minnesota. So, when we preview the week later in the pod, we'll get into all those. But I will leave you to kind of fill everyone in on what to expect or guys to watch in the Mountain West, since that's a little more your forte.
Yes. So, again, Big Ten coming back, very excited. It's going to be a challenge for me Friday night, trying to figure out when to start the Badger game, because the new Borat movie's coming out too. So I got to figure out how I'm going to approach that one, but I will definitely be watching the Badgers. But when it comes to Mountain West, you're up late Saturday night. You don't know who any of these guys are. I can help you. The big quarterbacks to know, Chavin Cordero, Hawaii, they lost their coach, Nick Rolovich. He's at Wazoo now, so they replaced Air Raid with Air Raid. Hawaii didn't quite do that. They had one of the stranger hires. I guess no one really talked about it again because it's Hawaii. They might not be pulling the most headlines, but Todd Graham, former Arizona State coach from a few years back, he's going to be taking over at Hawaii. But I still think that this is an offense that's going to hum. So Chavin Cordero should keep the swag meter going as far as that Hawaii quarterback tradition is concerned. Cole McDonald, of course, served it well over these last couple of years. Ronnie Rivers and Xavier Valladay, Valladay, Wyoming's running back, extremely talented. It's a run-heavy offense, so he's going to be a star for them. Ronnie Rivers, a do-it-all back for Fresno State, someone that can, on a regular season, 12-game season, he could challenge for 50, 60 catches in a season. He's just that kind of pass catcher out of the backfield, so he's going to be fun to watch, really valuable in PPR formats. George Helani, Boise State, always churning out good running backs. He's kind of like the latest among them, but they got plenty of good other backs as well. So we'll see if they rotate the same way that they did a year ago. And then at receiver, Rico Bussey, former North Texas guy. If you remember him from DFS from the last couple of seasons, he's been, he should be that new number one for Hawaii. That should bode well for his fantasy output. Dante Wright, a budding star at Colorado State. We'll have to see what Colorado State does with their offense, because they moved away from Mike Bobo, of course, and they got Steve Adazio in there. Steve Adazio's team's at BC, obviously not famous for putting up a ton of production through the air, but I still think that Dante Wright and the receivers they have there should really kind of tilt their philosophy towards the air. And then Khalil Shakir, kind of like the latest new number one for Boise State. John Hightower is gone, so it looks like he's going to be that new stud receiver who's moving the chains for Boise State. So those are the big Mountain West guys from a fantasy perspective. When you're building your late night fun Saturday lineups, I'm so glad that those are back.
So we have some good news and some bad news to run through before we get to our Week 7 reactions. Florida, Missouri, possibly in jeopardy looking ahead to next weekend. Of course, we saw Florida LSU canceled last weekend. And, you're looking ahead now to the Halloween weekend, and Florida kind of continues to deal with these positive tests. Some concern, I think tracing all the way back to the 8 weeks ago where that's coming from. So we'll keep an eye on that situation, but hopefully that game will be able to be played next week. Journey Brown may be out for the year at Penn State, a team that's already down Micah Parsons, one of the best players overall in the country, now down another big piece. What's the situation with Journey Brown? Has there really been any clarity on what this injury is?
I don't think it, at least since it got released on Tuesday night or announced what the exact thing that he's dealing with is. It's a medical condition, they said, has the potential to keep him out for the season. I'm holding out some hope, and he posted some optimistic stuff on his social media recently, but still not a ton of clarity as to what's exactly going on with him. I'm sure if you dive deep into the Penn State boards, I'm sure you got some wild theories out there as to what's up. But bottom line, we could be missing one of the most explosive running backs in college football, someone who is really going to take off this year, and I think maybe challenged to be in that top 3 tier among running backs. Just a really explosive talent. So it stinks that we're probably not going to be able to see him. Hopefully he comes back at some point this year and can help Penn State out a little bit. But yeah, as it stands, it looks like we're not going to have him or Parsons for Penn State. So that's too bad. Although don't feel too bad for Penn State. Noah Cain was one of the top running back recruits in last year's cycle. So he'll be ready to fill in right away. And, for fantasy purposes, you're not going to have to worry about guys losing carries. Like it should be the Noah Cain show pretty quickly there for Penn State. And I think that he's going to answer the bell pretty well.
I think you're 100% right about Noah Cain, but you have to consider the drop off in name. I mean, going from Journey Brown, one of the better first names in the entire country, to Noah, fine name. Nothing against a Noah. It's been raining a lot, maybe a good time to be a Noah, but Journey Brown, I mean, you're really not going to match that. And speaking of great names, the last item of bad news, I guess we have Puka Williams opting out, kind of going Vontae Davis mid-season, just piecing out from Kansas. Sounds like he's going to head back home to Louisiana and start preparing for the draft. So you can't blame them. They're 0-4. Things aren't looking like they're going to get a whole lot better for Kansas. Probably not a ton of upside to Puka Williams continuing to get beat up week after week. Where does his draft stock for you stand right now? Obviously kind of tough to project with a half season and everything that's going on, but where is he right now?
I mean, he'll end up having one of like the stranger college careers. It feels like, Puka, we hardly knew ye because, he had 100 carries last year and had 1,100 yards his freshman year, but it always felt like that, we're ready for him to build on what he did as a freshman in 2018. And it never quite happened that way. So it's one of those great unknowns, I guess. I mean, not quite to the level that we were talking about last week, but you wish you got to see the full three to four seasons of Puka. As far as his draft stock goes, I mean, he's listed at 170. That's pretty tough as far as like NFL running backs go. We don't size shame on this podcast, but at the same time, tough to really move the pile at that weight at the next level, let alone in college. So I don't know if he's going to have to move to the slot receiver position or just be like a third down only type of guy. But his days of being like a 200 carry type of player, I assume, are going to be done. So his body's probably thankful for that. But as far as his NFL prospects are concerned, I would imagine a day 3 type of billing for him, unless he's mislisted at 170.
So in the good news category, stats are back. BACK back for college football on RotoWire.com. We touched on this last week. We've been going through, I would say, a crisis. Not an unmitigated crisis, but a crisis nonetheless. And one of our stat providers, you and I have very little information on this, but basically there was a technological breakdown, I guess, to some degree that's been affecting our site for the last couple of weeks. But all stats are now back for college football heading into the weekend.
Yes, so it looks like game logs are back, targets even are back. So once again, we're back up and running as far as our data is concerned, and we have all those stuff from last week and the week prior. Those were the 2 weeks that were missing because of that stats outage. So things are good as far as the player research is concerned. I think that some of the team stats might still be getting caught up, but either way, this was something that was affecting not just us, but DraftKings and FanDuel and some other places. I think even like Fantrax was having some issues with their stats. So I mean, like, this wasn't just us, but it was still just like an overall, like, we got to get this figured out. I'm so glad that it's figured out. It allows you, the listener, the user, to get your research done as far as the slates go for this week and setting your lineups, and it allows me to do the best research that I can. So it's a huge relief, because sitting there with hundreds of players worth of games being completely just red barred out on their game logs, it's like, oh my God, like how can we work with this? But now they're back, so everything is back to normal here, and we're back to having some of the best college football stats and resources that we can possibly have.
Mm-hmm. Good news all around. John, let's get to week 7. Walk me through your day on Saturday leading up to Alabama, Georgia.
Wake up with a glint of hope in my eye. Very excited. Deep down, I thought somehow Georgia was going to find a way to win. I think I laid out a pretty realistic / pessimistic case for Georgia during the pod last week, and their offensive shortcomings with Stetson Bennett probably was going to be the limiting factor that prevents them from getting the win. But then the first play happens on Saturday night. I sit down over at my buddy Jake's place up here. He's a fellow Georgia grad as well, so we got to hunker down, you dogs out there. So
dogs up.
Yeah, we even had Terrapin Beers, which is a beer that is brewed in Athens. Great brewery there. So it felt like we had all the Athens and Georgia power going in our direction. And then that first play happens. Mac Jones gets hit as he throws. It's an interception. I thought they easily could have not ruled that an interception, actually. So it's like, oh my God, not only is the play going in our favor, but like the refs have something going for us too. Yeah. Obviously, Georgia just gives it right back, and Stetson Bennett's getting passes batted down, not just off the fingertips, but dude's whole forearms, just knocking his passes down. So it's like, okay, we might be in a bit of trouble here. Yeah. And Georgia held up extremely well in the first half, and I think that just at the end of the day, you got to go in knowing that Jalen Waddle's going to get you once or twice, and John Mechie probably might do it too, and Devonte Smith, of course. So how are you going to put 30-plus points on the board against Alabama? Because it's basically, if Georgia can't hold them under 30, I don't know if any other defense can. So Georgia needed to score more, and they just simply couldn't. And at the end of the day, the levees started to break midway through the third quarter, and it just became a very soul-cleaving exercise for the next hour and a half or whatever it was. And at which point the Terrapins were consumed at a more rapid pace.
As they should have been. Yeah, I mean, this is a game that Georgia led midway through the third quarter. I mean, it really was, like you said, once the levees broke, and the water came flowing in, or the Terrapin ales came flowing in about as quickly as they could. And I would say a little bit of a misleading final score. Alabama was certainly dominant, for the final 20 minutes or so of that game. But I don't know if I'd go as far as to say Georgia dominated the first half, but they certainly were in control. And once Stetson Bennett started turning the ball over, I mean, it was obviously over from that point. But I think you have to be at least semi-encouraged that Georgia put up the fight they did with the quarterback play that they got in this game. I mean, 18 of 40 did get up close to 217 yards, but under 50% completion, 3 picks. You're just not going to beat Alabama with those numbers.
No, you're definitely not. Alabama had a really good game plan to force the passes towards the middle again. So Bennett has his own troubles getting the ball over the offensive and defensive line in the first place. But then, I mean, when you're talking about just removing outside receivers like George Pickens and Kyaris Jackson, two huge performers, and just kind of funneling it to Jermaine Burton, who's the less of all evils. If you're talking about this from a Bama perspective. you'll let Jermaine Burton try to beat you all day as opposed to George Pickens or Kearis Jackson. So Burton, had some freshman moments, had a touchdown, but, in the end, Bama was happy to let him get all the targets as opposed to those other guys. And it's a plan that worked out well, and Georgia didn't have the quarterback play to force the issue elsewhere.
Clemson absolutely rolls over another opponent this past week. Man, this is one where you really can't make any excuses or try to frame it any other way. This was a thorough beatdown from start to finish by Clemson.
It was one of those ones where I'm on the XM show during the early window of games, and the producers like during each commercial break are just like, dude, Trevor Lawrence just threw another touchdown, like, oh my god, or just like every single dude, Trevor has like 300 yards in the first quarter, is not over. Just like, what is going on? And I've had nice things to say about Georgia Tech and the progress that they're making, but that's one that it's a quick reality check that you are still light years away from I don't think they're aspiring to be the next Clemson or anything. They're just aspiring to be like a normal college football program, and Clemson just let them know that they're not even ready for that just yet.
Yeah, they're aspiring to be like the next Missouri.
yeah.
Clemson has Syracuse this week, I believe, right? And
yes.
I believe that Syracuse lost to Georgia Tech.
Yes, they did.
By transitive property, how many points is Clemson going to score this week?
It's a name your own score adventure for Clemson. They might have gotten it all out last week, and they might just keep this to like 50 points or something. Yeah. But like their implied total is like 53 points. I think the spread is like in the 40s, unless that's like a misprint or something. But if that's the case, playing against a conference foe and you're north of 5 touchdowns, north of 6 touchdown favorites. What else can you really say? Like, Syracuse, I have no words of encouragement for you. It's going to be a long day on Saturday, but it might be just a quick death though. You might just know right away how it's going to go. So at least there's that, and you can flip over to whatever else you're going to watch. Yeah,
the spread for that one is at 46 points. So like you said, nearly 7 touchdowns with extra points. Conversely, we had 80 combined points in that Clemson-Georgia Tech game. 73 came from Clemson. We had 19 in the Louisville-Notre Dame game. Notre Dame held on. That's what's important in a season where I think more so than ever, it's just if you want to have a chance at the playoff, just don't lose games. Doesn't necessarily matter how you do it. We've seen Louisville, kind of go up and down based on the opponent all season.
Yep.
This was not a pretty game for Notre Dame, not a great game for Ian Book, who barely got over 100 yards passing in this game, did only have 19 attempts. A decent day on the ground for Notre Dame. That's where they made most of their hay. But, at the end of the day, just a really, really ugly type of game that you really don't see too often in the year 2020.
No. So, defense prevailed there. I think Ian Book was quoted after the game as saying that was like the windiest conditions that he's ever played in. So I think that definitely played a role. Mikhail Cunningham on the other side, completing like 16 of 19 of his passes, but like at barely 7 yards per attempt. Just the passing games just weren't really viable in this game because of the conditions. Louisville, they stood up to that Notre Dame run game a lot better. I think, it helps knowing that Notre Dame's going to run the ball, so you can, kind of key things up that way. But even still, I thought that they showed a lot more backbone against the run than, say, they did against Miami earlier in the season. So if you're going to take away a positive, I guess it's that for as far as if you're Louisville. If you're Notre Dame, you got to be concerned that you're still like not all that efficient on the ground against Louisville. I know I was just giving Louisville credit, but at the same time, if you're aspiring to be a playoff team the way that Notre Dame is, I think you got to roll a little bit harder in that matchup than they ended up doing. I thought they continue to play sloppy games against bad teams. The schedule's been very, very favorable towards Notre Dame so far. I mean, Duke, South Florida, a Florida State team that was making a new starter at quarterback, and now Louisville. Exactly a murderer's row, and that can certainly help you in the rankings right now. But now we're getting Big Ten and Pac-12 considerations in here. You're going to start to need a little bit more in the way of style points, and I think this week against Pitt is not the spot for them to do it, honestly.
Are you concerned that could be a loss? or that just won't be that convincing of a win.
They grow the grass tall at Heinz Field, just like they used to at Notre Dame before they switched to turf like a bunch of sellouts.
Oh, disgusting.
So, I mean, Pitt can muddy it up for anybody. I think I'll just say that. We know that Pitt, there's another college football podcast out there that talks about the Pitt super weapon charging. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't for this game. I don't know if they're going to have Kenny Pickett, their quarterback, there. But again, Pitt just kind of like operates outside of the realm of reality, and they can occasionally pull something like this off. So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if they did knock off Notre Dame at home this week.
Now, cannot put anything past Larod Stevens howling you.
Darn, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Let's see. Let's go to North Carolina, Florida State. I couldn't decide between that and UCF, but North Carolina, I think they deserve a little bit of a tongue lashing here. This is inexcusable.
Yeah, I mean,
inexcusable.
Florida State, I mean, we've talked about it, man. Like they are among those traditional, like, you know, the Who's Back Bowl. Like they weren't even allowed into the party for that. Like that's how far they had fallen. And now North Carolina just totally lays an egg against them, and FSU kind of dominates. I didn't have eyes on that much during Saturday night just because I was mostly just subjecting myself to the torture in Tuscaloosa. But
of course,
I was still just I was surprised mostly that the defense let down. The defense had been really consistent all year, and it let down a little bit against Florida State, and the offense, you know, had its moments. Sam Howell had some numbers, and the running backs were still great. But, you know, I think North Carolina was definitely one of those teams that was artificially ranked where it was. Weren't they like number 5 going into that game?
They were number 5, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, they certainly are not that. I think that they're like a solid number 12 or something like that. But asking UNC to hold up a top 10 ranking over the course of the season, even with the talent that they have and the experience on defense, it was probably a bit of wishful thinking for the Tar Heel fans.
Yeah, disappointing game, especially defensively for North Carolina. Like you said, I mean, Sam Howell gives you almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, did throw a pick in this one. It wasn't overly efficient. I mean, QBR of 35, which is not great, especially when you look over on the Florida side and their quarterback, Jordan Travis, 8 of 19, 191 yards, touchdown and a pick. I think if you saw that statistical line, you know, before the game and told North Carolina that's what you're going to hold them to, you'd feel pretty good. And then Florida State still manages, you know, to put up 31. So very disappointing game from North Carolina. I'm with you though. I mean, that team, and again, part of it was due to some of these teams missing. They never really truly seemed like a top 5 team. See, no. It looks weird to have that little number 5 next to UNC.
It makes next to no sense.
All right, Memphis UCF. Another barn burner, 50-49 in this one in favor of Memphis. Fantastic game for Brady White through the air, 34 of 50, 486 yards, 6 touchdowns, no picks. That's a QBR of 93. I mean, another fantastic game on the other side for Dylan Gabriel, 35 of 49, 601 yards, 5 touchdowns. That's a QBR just south of 90. These are the type of games that you'd like to see from these American Conference teams. I don't need a 12-7 game. I would rather watch a 50-49. A really fun game, you know, from an objective perspective. But then you look at UCF. All of a sudden, UCF is 2-2. It kind of starts to seem like that run that they had, you know, kind of in the middle part of this decade. You know, maybe that's something that's going to be looked at as in the rear view going forward.
Yeah, it very well may be. And if they continue to like maybe lag behind a little bit on recruiting, and they're not like restocking, you know, the cupboard every single year with strong recruiting classes as that New Year's Six as those New Year's Six appearances go further and further into the rear view, it's a little bit tougher sell that they are like the premier group of 5 program. And they had this one kind of in the bag. I mean, they were killing Memphis in the first half, I thought, and you know, everything was going their way. They could not be stopped, and then the defense just kind of breaks down. And this was a game where Memphis had DeMonte Coxey like basically leave the program Saturday morning. So a guy that, you know, had been eating up like a third of their targets suddenly just like pieces out, and you still let Memphis hang 50 on you. Like, yeah, shame on you as well, UCF. I will continue to use you liberally for DFS purposes, but as far as like being a respectful program, I think, or a respectable program, you're teetering on the edge.
Yeah, really disappointing stuff from UCF. The last game I want to hit, Kentucky, Tennessee. Tennessee is not back. Tennessee was
No.
ranked heading into that game. Another team, they weren't ranked as high as UNC, but another team that you just like, no, this isn't right. You don't belong here.
Mm-mm.
And that was firmly cemented by Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee is a team that has a good amount of talent. Jeremy Pruitt has built some decent, recruiting classes there. The offensive line is legit. You love the running back combination. Even the receivers are pretty solid. But end of the day, Jared Garantano is just not the answer. And I don't know if anyone else on that roster is right now. They could turn the keys over to the freshman. I'm blanking on his name, but he was like a pretty highly regarded quarterback. So there's a chance if Tennessee wants to start kind of looking ahead to next year, which after a couple of losses in division might not be the worst idea, and then maybe hit the ground running next year with this kid being relatively well seasoned and ready to go in 2021, whatever it may be. Tennessee throws all those pick sixes and then decides to fire the defensive line coach. Classic correlation between those two, as it were. And I think there's like a really stiff buyout for for a defensive coordinator at Tennessee. So someone tweeted out like nobody does bad buyouts quite like Tennessee, and God bless them for keeping that tradition going. But again, on the other side of it, Kentucky can do that to teams. Like if you play sloppy, they're gonna hurt you every single time. They're extremely well coached. I love the way that Stoops has those guys rolling. So Kentucky's no joke. As a Georgia guy, I'm worried about that game up in Lexington coming up on Halloween. So I mean, yeah, Kentucky again. I mean, they can hold Mike Leach to 2 points. So 0 points essentially. They can kill Tennessee the way that they did. Kentucky is legit. Like they're almost like the Tennessee Titans of college football. Like it can go sideways for them, and they definitely can't play catch up or anything like that. But if they play their game, they can beat almost anybody.
Yeah, if they're feeding the ball to Frank Wycheck, they're unstoppable. Nobody has an answer. All right, where do you want to start? Where do you want to start for week 8?
I would like to hear your take on this Illinois-Wisconsin game because, like you said, this spread has shrunk 4 points, I think, last on this podcast. So is that respect to Illinois? Is that enough people just being like, Wisconsin, there are too many unknowns about like their firepower with no Jonathan Taylor and no Jack Cohn. So what do we make about that, and what's your expectation for that game?
Well, so I think it opened at 23.5, if I remember correctly. And I'm guessing that was just one where, Mr. Oddsmaker in Vegas is just kind of going through and you see Illinois, Wisconsin, you're just like, oh, yeah, just plug in 23.5, whatever. Forgetting that Illinois won that game last year. It was at Illinois. It was an Illinois team that had some pieces, that are probably better than what they have this year. But that was also a Wisconsin team that had Jonathan Taylor, that had a healthy Jack Cohn, that had more talent on defense, that had, 2 better receivers. They have Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor, but I think they had like arguably the best Wisconsin receiving core ever last year, which isn't saying a whole lot, but it's saying something. So I think there's more attrition on the Wisconsin side than people realize, and I also think there's more unknowns on the Wisconsin side. Like Graham Mertz, we talked about this last week. Like the recruiting pedigree is there, but that doesn't guarantee anything. And I'm optimistic, but we really have never seen him play in anything resembling a high leverage situation at the college level. By all indications, he was fine last year, in practice, getting those reps, but never to the point where, he seriously challenged Jack Cohn for that job, like a lot of people thought he would coming into the year. And credit to Jack Cohn for playing well enough that it was never in question. So, I mean, dropping the spread 4 points, making it 19.5, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It would be a much bigger deal if they were opening with, say, Minnesota or Michigan or even a team like Nebraska that has a little bit more talent. So I'm not necessarily worried about Wisconsin losing this game, but I don't think it's going to be like last year. I think they opened at South Florida last year, if I remember correctly, and just rolled
Friday
over
night.
them. And that was a team that also had a lot of question marks, and they just rolled. And it set the tone for the rest of that season. I think Wisconsin wins. I think it's going to be a little bit ugly. I think they have 4 or 5 guys who they might want to get some work in this backfield. That's not always a recipe for success. I just don't see Wisconsin, coming out and just like bowling over Illinois like it normally would.
No, I don't think so either. lost a couple guys to the NFL on the offensive line as well, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, there's just too many like moving pieces right now and unknowns to trust Wisconsin with that kind of number. So I would be shocked if Illinois came in here and pulled the upset, of course. I just think that, like you said, that this might not be like the electric steamroller type of opening to the season that we saw a year ago with this Wisconsin team.
And you're putting Mertz in a tough spot, making his first start. It's supposed to be probably by kickoff. It's going to be like 40 degrees and probably rainy.
Yeah, it is miserable up in Wisconsin bad. Right now.
This is the last week has just been the definition of dreary. It's been raining for like 40 hours in a row here in Milwaukee, and I don't think that's going to let up anytime soon. So, I mean, I think these people who have these delusions of Wisconsin all of a sudden becoming like Alabama, where you can run for 250 yards, and then you have Tua come in and he can also throw for 400 yards when he needs to. Like, I don't think that's going to happen short or long term. It's certainly not going to happen tomorrow night.
No, it's going to be gross out. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of just like 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of offense from both sides, but Wisconsin will end up taking it.
I think given the conditions, 3 yards in a puddle of mud, I think it's a little more appropriate.
Can you take it all the way?
NC State, North Carolina, one of our, I believe we have 3 ranked versus ranked matchups this week. None as high profile, but still a couple good ones. North Carolina, we just got done chastising them. Obviously, they need to bounce back. NC State comes in 4-1. This game is at North Carolina. Spread is 15.5, which to me is a little bit big considering what we just saw from North Carolina and, a team that's been relatively shaky even before that.
Right. So, yeah, we only really saw UNC get it rolling offensively. Virginia Tech a couple of weeks ago. With NC State, I think that they've probably earned that number 23 ranking. That's about where they should be. But I do think that they had a quarterback injury to Devin Leary. I think he broke his fibula, so he's going to be out for a while. So it's not like Leary came into the year with a stronghold on the job. So they've gotten other guys with game action. I think Bailey Hawkman is one of them. So that I think explains the line, but I think it also, there's reason to believe that that NC State can keep this relatively close. I think if UNC plays their game, then they should be able to take care of business here. I think that you've got 2 just ridiculous running backs in Devonte Williams and Michael Carter. I think both of those guys, if Howell's off, you can just ride those guys, and I think that they should be able to take care of business against NC State's defense. I don't think NC State's defense is all that special. The offense had been clicking under Devin Leary. It hasn't under Bailey Hawkman in the past. So I think that this is going to be a relatively low-scoring game. If NC State tries to establish the run on UNC, I think that's where UNC can kind of stiffen up and answer them and force them to throw the ball outside. I don't think they really have those guys other than Emeka Emezie, maybe Kerry Angeline, the tight end. But in the end, UNC, I agree that they should be about 2 touchdown favorites in this one. They should be able to take care of business.
What is your read on number 17 Iowa State at now number 6 Oklahoma State?
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but in most years, this is like the game that you base your DFS weekend off of. And it's like, okay, we got Chuba and Breece Hall. How do I fit them into a lineup? How do I get Tylan Wallace involved and Spencer Sanders? I think Spencer Sanders might be back this week finally. So that'll be good. But I think the defenses rule here. I think that OK State brought a ton back on defense this year, and they've been solid on that side of the ball. I can't believe I'm saying that. And then Iowa State is tough on that side of the ball as well. So I think that this ends up being a relatively low-scoring game. Kind of amazing when you look at the matchup here. Oklahoma State, just expected to score 27 points in this one, and they're 3.5 point favorites. So I mean, an over/under at less than 60 for a game like this is pretty shocking, but I think it's real. I mean, 51.5 is the total, and I'm buying it, man. It's going to be a defensive slugfest by Big 12 standards, oddly enough.
Yeah, very strange to see both of these teams, especially Oklahoma State in this position. Let's go to Bama, Tennessee real quickly. What's your pick for this one? Who you got?
Straight up, I think Alabama might have him.
I like Alabama. Only 21.5 is the line. That feels a little conservative to me.
that seems to imply that like they think that Alabama's going to kind of like take their foot off the gas, coming off the big win over the third ranked team, like they might play not as buttoned up football as we're used to seeing. So that implies some of that. As for the spread, I think Tennessee they're going to continue to make mistakes. I think they're a tough team, and I think that they have some things going for them. But the second that they're in catch-up mode, which they're going to be against Alabama pretty quickly, I think it's going to fall apart on them, and this will get ugly, and we will continue to see Alabama continue to dominate this side of the rivalry, just like they have since the days of the famous Mount Cody blocked field goal like over 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was early Saban years, right?
Yeah, I think that I think is considered like one of the games that kind of started to vault Alabama into like, okay, like the sleeping giant has awakened.
Mm-hmm. The game of the weekend, Michigan at Minnesota. This is at TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Conditions are even worse in Minneapolis than they are in our neck of the woods, John. Projected weather for that game, 33 degrees and rain. Obviously, you're running the risk of snow if that drops down another degree or two. This is the ABC 6:30 game. All eyes are going to be on this one. All the other appealing games, in my opinion, at least, are earlier in the day. That's going up against like Cincinnati, SMU, which is another ranked versus ranked. And on the aggregate, both of those teams are ranked higher than Michigan and Minnesota. But this is where my eyes are going to be on Saturday night. This is a massive game for both programs for much different reasons. We've talked a lot about Michigan on this podcast in the past. This is one of those, like, you better not lose this game for Michigan. And for Minnesota, yeah, you can lose it. You're Minnesota. There's not a lot of expectations, but this is a real statement game and a statement opportunity for them in week one of their season, especially to really demonstrate that, everything, all the progress that they've made over the last two seasons and especially last year wasn't just some sort of mirage.
Exactly. Because they do have to fight that off because, go ahead. If they slip this year that it's just PJ Fleck, like getting it going for a couple years, but can't sustain it, that sort of thing. Maybe he's looking somewhere else already. So coming out here and winning is absolutely crucial for this Minnesota team to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. Because people weren't buying it until what were they, like 9-0, like 10-0 or something before?
Well, I think did they beat? Was it Penn State they beat?
Yes.
That was the one that finally sealed it. And then, of course, they immediately lost to Wisconsin. But, yeah, I think that the Penn State game at home was the one that really kind of grabbed people's attention.
Yep, that was game day. And, so they were cruising along undefeated, but it's like, who have they played? Well, it's like, okay, they haven't played anybody, but they're killing everybody. So eventually they end up beating Penn State. They lost to Iowa, I think, the following week, too, and then finished it out with a pretty bullying performance from Wisconsin against them. So that was fun. But in the end, my expectations of this game, there's a lot of unknowns on Michigan's side because they didn't just lose Shea Patterson. Not like that's a huge thing, but at the same time, Dylan McCaffrey at the program. So, they're turning it over to Joe Milton, who's a pretty unproven quarterback. He got some mobility to him. So, maybe it elicits visions of Denard Robinson days or that sort of thing, but we'll have to see.
Ex-Jaguars running back Denard Robinson.
That's right. Shoelaces, right? And then what else? Tariq Black is gone. He plays for Texas now. Donovan Peoples-Jones is gone. So a really green group of receivers, and none of them particularly like highly touted as far as recruiting is concerned. Certainly not to the level that Tariq Black or DPJ were. So it's going to be Ronnie Bell. It's going to be Zach Charbonnet and Hassan Haskins as the running backs. I think that they're going to be really important to this game because of the conditions and just trying to keep Milton, under 25 passes or something like that if you're Michigan. But either way, God, what an annoying matchup of coaches, huh?
Yeah, seriously. No Nico Collins either for Michigan.
Right. Yep.
Although if there's a story on him earlier this week, if you read that, like Harbaugh's leaving the door open for him to come back. I have no idea what
I'm
the
sure
rules
he
are.
is. Why wouldn't you?
I have no idea what the rules are on that. Collins is I'm preparing for the draft. I'm absolutely out. It pains me to watch them play, but I'm out. And then there's like the next paragraph. It's like Harbaugh saying, well, he's not with us right now, but we'd welcome him back. It's like, buddy, he's not coming back. He's not coming back.
I know she just left the bar with him, but like, she'll be back.
my my door's open. She's got a key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough spot for Michigan. Honestly, I mean, it would be a little different, I guess, if you're playing at Michigan, even with no fans. There's still the element of going on the road, being uncomfortable. I mean, this is, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago? We talked about like where is Harbaugh, where is Michigan, and all this. It's just kind of this muddled mess. I really think this has a chance to like light his seat as hot as it's been. If they lose this game convincingly, it kind of sinks your season right away. And then all of a sudden 2020 is just a lost year from the start. And, Michigan's had a lot of lost years, but usually they wait until at least like midseason or late in the year for the Ohio State game to make it official. And if they lose this game, I think it's going to start like a 8-week long dialogue on the Harbaugh situation.
Yeah, because again, like next year is the final year of his contract, and like as Pete Thamel said, like you either get fired or you get extended. Like nobody coaches into the last year of their contract anymore. And if you start things off in what kind of then functions as your contract year with a loss on the road to a team that's ranked lower than you, even though they are ranked, it's still, Michigan holds itself to expectations. They never seem to get there anymore, but like at a certain point, it's like, man, like, is it ever going to happen under Harbaugh? And like, I think that this would be a very sobering way to start the season if they come out and they don't get the win Saturday in Minnesota.
Tell you what, though, it's got to be nice. I mean, you're a Georgia fan, so you're in this category, but it's got to be nice to be a school that's won a national title in the last 50 years. Like the amount of gravitas that gives you, it like Michigan's done nothing for 20 years. It just doesn't matter at all. And if they fire Harbaugh, it's going to be a huge story. Whoever they hire is going to have huge expectations. Like what a place to be.
If it's been more than like 10 or 15 years though, the message boards come back out for you. The
message boards do, but in general, I mean, like all these teams that we're talking about, Miami's in the same spot. Like that job, if it opens up, is still almost as high profile as it would have been in 2003. It's just it never wears off. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people like to bring up 1980 for just to fit Georgia things in there. Yeah.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah.
A few ranked on unranked or completely unranked matchups to look at before we close on that Cincy SMU game that we mentioned. We got TCU at Oklahoma. We got South Carolina at LSU this week. LSU very badly needs a win.
Boy, do they. Did you see those Ed Orgeron pictures?
I mean, I look at a lot of Coach O pictures. You have to be a lot more specific. Okay,
there were a couple that surfaced yesterday while they got smacked with some sanctions from the NCAA. Some of them stemming from OBJ's, handing out not monopoly money. It turns out after the national title game. Who could have thought that? Again, LSU probably doesn't really care in the long run. They'll have last season to bask on forever. But as far as like this year goes, I mean, Miles Brennan banged up still. We talked about him last week. He probably wasn't going to be able to play, even if LSU Florida was still on. It looks like he's still doubtful. I think Orgeron said on Wednesday's SEC teleconference that he doesn't expect him to go. So it's going to be one of the two freshmen. I think it's going to be Max Johnson, but we'll see. He's the more highly touted of those recruits between the two. Yeah, LSU really, like, this season could go extremely sideways, and there was some comparison on like the Feinbaum show not too long ago, like a week and a half ago, about is Coach O just like Cajun Gene Chizik, and like he wins the title off of having like a just generational year, like a type of season from one guy that you only see once a decade, if that, in the way that Chizik benefited from Cam Newton. Then once that season passed, those next 2 years for Auburn were abysmal, and LSU season is trending towards abysmal. And I don't know if I would quite say that Coach O is just Gene Chizik, but I mean, like, you got to have some coaching chops at a certain point. And, we're at a situation now where with no Joe Brady, no Dave Aranda, you need superstar coordinators to support a guy like Coach O, I think. And he doesn't have them right now. I think Bo Pelini continues to get them into trouble. He let 40 points up to Missouri, not very adaptive in his scheme. So that doesn't seem like it's going to work out. That'll be a one and done. But I don't think, again, Orgeron's seat is hot whatsoever right now, but this has the chance to be a very bad season for LSU, and I think like come next year, if they don't get the coordinator hires right after I assume they get rid of Pelini and maybe whatever's up on the offensive side of the ball, then maybe that discourse starts to creep in starting next year.
Yeah, I don't think that's totally wrong. I mean, he's always conducted himself as more of like the figurehead type of coach, right? I mean, I don't think he's ever purported to be like the master strategist or anything like that. And I think being the figurehead works really well when you have strategists on your staff and when you have superior talent, or at least talent that matches the other elite programs. But I don't know that he's the type of like floor raising coach. I think when the pieces are there, he's great. He kind of in the NBA of like a Phil Jackson, and obviously Phil Jackson is so much more accomplished, but Phil Jackson got to a point like basically after coaching the Bulls where it was like, I'm only coaching a team that's going to win the title. Like you would never hire Phil Jackson to coach the Charlotte Hornets, or manage the New York Knicks, for example, going through a rebuild. I think Coach O, it's not a perfect comparison by any means, but I think he operates very well when things around him are going well, and you kind of need somebody to steer the ship. But when you need someone to do all the little dirty work that goes into a program, maybe not quite as forte.
Yeah, I don't think so. So, I mean, and I had a very low opinion on Coach O as a coach going into last year. So, I mean, that's what made like last year such like a gigantic eating of my own words as far as he goes, because again, we saw what a program can look like under him when everything is going right. Like those guys were absolutely going to war for him every single Saturday and crushing every single buddy that they faced. But when things aren't going as well, I mean, we've seen some lean-ish, underperformed years from LSU under Coach O before that. So is this a return to the norm, and was last year a fluke? I guess starts to become a little bit of a question.
All right, let's take a look at the DFS slate for this weekend. We'll start off. You got games, teams you're targeting overall before we get into the nuts and bolts at each spot?
Yeah, so this is a really fun slate. It's 12 games. Knock on wood, none of them are going to be postponed the way that we've had that go the last couple of weeks here. But there's a lot of ways to go about it. Clemson kind of leads the pack. I mean, again, their expected score over 50. It's going to be hard to go away from them. Obviously, my concerns about Trevor Lawrence every single week. It's like, what if he gets pulled at halftime? Well, it's like, well, what if he throws for 400 yards in one half? You freaking idiot. So he could certainly do that again against Clemson. Like that's definitely not out of the question. And I think I need to put some more respect on like Amari Rodgers' name. I think that he's doing a lot better than I would have expected, even with Justin Ross being out for the season. So Clemson, hard to stay away from them. It's just an expensive proposition. Like, how do you build out the rest of your lineup? Alabama, same way. Although Mac Jones is kind of a bargain relative. I think he's like 8,300 or something like that. So that's definitely not bad. I think it's just one of those weeks where like you try to get as much Bama and Clemson exposure as you can, and then see where those values are elsewhere. Jalen Waddle at 7,700, I think is a totally reasonable price. He's 700 less than Devonte Smith, so I'm going to be chasing that, for example. So those are like the two teams that really tee it off. Virginia Tech's offense is rolling right now. Khalil Herbert, Hendon Hooker, both those guys are killing it right now. UNC has a high implied total. Auburn has been gross and bad and terrible for most of the season. Like, should have lost to Arkansas. I guess they did lose to South Carolina, if I remember correctly, last week. But there's some pieces on that offense that we'll get to that might be worth considering. And then once again, fading off that Oklahoma State, Iowa State game. And I'm a little bit morbidly curious about this Louisville, Florida State game. I think that one has some sneaky potential. I might throw a game stack of that one, go against the grain of the field. I'm not saying it's going to work out quite as well as Virginia Tech UNC did the other week, but another one with that kind of powder keg potential.
All right, let's get into the quarterbacks. As you mentioned, you get Mac Jones at a little bit of a bargain relative to the other elites. He's at 83. You have Sam Ehlinger leading the way at 9,900. Trevor Lawrence, 95. Hendon Hooker at Virginia Tech, 87. And then Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma going up against TCU. He's at 8,500. what's the case for Ellinger? Going up against a Baylor team that by the time this game kicks off, it will have been 3 full weeks since they played a competitive football game.
Right. So, yeah, Baylor's been one of those programs that has had a tough time getting their season on the rails because of the COVID issues. Again, 3 weeks now. And they're going up against a Texas team that had a full week to lick its wounds after the Oklahoma debacle, that 4 overtime game. So Texas, their season's on the brink of absolute disaster, and they need this. So I think that Sam Ellinger is game for it. It's just a matter of can you make a lineup that you like this week, spending almost $10K on your quarterback? So I like Ellinger. He's probably my highest projected quarterback for this week, other than Zach Wilson, or at least for this slate. So other than Zach Wilson and Justin Fields, it's just a matter of, can you make a lineup that you like with him? So I'm throwing that out there. Trevor Lawrence, again, what he can do. I'm not introducing any new ideas about him by saying that that he can put up 400 yards and a half, and you're happy with it. I'm not counting on that happening 2 weeks in a row. I want a little bit more maybe rushing potential from my quarterback this week, so I might go more towards a Hendon Hooker this week as far as those expensive quarterbacks go. I think that's going to be a very up-tempo game, not a lot of defense being played on either side, so I think we're going to see points on both sides, and I think that Hooker, maybe not the most efficient passer or highest volume passer, but he does have some weapons there in the passing game to juice his numbers, and I think that he has that chance to run 15, 16 times, and if he does, I think that he has a legitimate chance at going over 100 yards on that type of workload. So I like him a lot. Sam Howell against NC State, we talked about him a little bit, and then I guess my value quarterback of the week is probably Terry Wilson of Kentucky. He's checking in at 6K. Missouri's defense still finding its way. They let in a lot of points to an LSU offense that might not actually be all that good, all things considered. So I think that Terry Wilson should have some success here. You're not banking on the 300 yards from him, but I think that he can do some serious damage with his legs to hit that value at 6K. So as a super flex option, you could definitely do worse.
All right, at the running back position, Najee Harris didn't quite go for 205 touchdowns against Georgia, but another formidable effort from him, 150 and a score. In that one, he leads the way by a pretty good margin, too, at 9,700. Then you go down to Breece Hall at 9,000 in that Iowa State, OK State defensive battle. Khalil Herbert at 8,800, Travis Etienne at 8,200, and then Devonte Williams at North Carolina rounds out the top 5. He is at 7,800. Who's your favorite play overall, whether it's from that group or anyone on this slate?
So it's probably Khalil Herbert. I'm interested in potentially doing usually you don't do a quarterback and a running back in a lineup, but I think that those two could really account for well over 200 yards on the ground between the two of them and several touchdowns on the ground. Herbert, it's hard to really understate how good he's been thus far this season. He's been absolutely ridiculous. I think one of the bigger surprises in college football. So he's been absolutely dominant on the ground for a Virginia Tech team that hasn't had a dominant running back in a little while. So it's been fun to watch him. And he just transferred from Kansas and is killing it like this. 8,800. Wake Forest gives up almost 5 yards a carry. I think he's going to see the workload. I think it's all going to click for him at 8,800. So when you look at guys like Najee Harris and Breece Hall having potentially tougher matchups than Herbert has, I go Herbert pretty much exclusively. I might get some Breece Hall. I'm not going to chase Najee Harris at 9,700. That might burn me, of course, but I think that Tennessee's defense does a little bit more backbone than Ole Miss's. So I think that it'll look a little bit more like last week's game for Najee Harris, maybe a little bit more production, but certainly more like that one than the 5-touchdown one against Ole Miss. I love Tank Bigsby this week. I know I was just talking about Auburn. That's a guy who really is coming into his own. Gus Malzahn has been really gushing of his praise of him. This Auburn offense has been weird under Chad Morris, but at least Bigsby is really making it work. 2 games in a row with at least 100 yards. He's had at least 16 carries in each of those games. Mississippi coughs up 6.1 yards per carry, so this sets up extremely well for Tank Bigsby.
What do you do in the absence of Puka now? Is there something to exploit, at least for a week here, before the prices change?
So there's a guy named Tori Lachlan, and I'm still like kind of doing my research on him, but he's a guy who had pretty explosive production in high school. I think he might have been a quarterback that like threw for 2,500 and ran for 2,500 in a season or something crazy like that. So he's got some athleticism, got some ability. Kansas is just running out of healthy bodies. So, and this is a Les Miles guy. So I think with that in mind, we might see some work from Lachlan one way or the other, either in the backfield or maybe taking some snaps behind center. Obviously, these type of guys carry a ton of risk, and building your lineup around the premise of a 3K guy at least giving you 6 points can be a little bit dicey when this guy literally has 0 fantasy points per game thus far. So it's risky, but I think that if you're swimming in the min priced end of the pool, you can squint hard enough, and I think talk yourself into Lachlan. I would advise doing a little bit more research. I'm sure I'll touch on him in my DraftKings column, but he's someone to consider. And then Deuce Vaughn, the running back for K-State on the other side. I mean, Kansas just can't stop anybody. I mean, we saw it last week with Letty Brown. We loved that Letty Brown play, and it turned out beautifully. I think Deuce Vaughn could do similarly, and I think that he's even like more dangerous as a pass catcher. So that's the way I'm seeing it as far as the running backs go.
All right, at receiver, Devonte Smith, as you mentioned earlier in the pod, number one in the rankings there. He's at 8,400. Elijah Moore at Ole Miss at 8,100. Jalen Waddle, Devonte Smith's teammate, is at 77. You got Tylan Wallace at 73, and Kenny Yeboah also at Ole Miss going up against Auburn at 7,100. I have a feeling you like somebody who's a little bit further down the board, though.
Yeah, I think that this might be Tutu Atwell time. I'm very much in on this Florida State Louisville game, maybe being like the sneakiest game on the board. Atwell, again, the passing conditions weren't great in South Bend last week. That shouldn't be the case this time around, hopefully. So I think the passing game gets a little bit more involved here. Atwell really kind of owns the market share as far as like the Louisville pass catchers go. So if Cunningham's dropping back, it's probably going to him. And, he's a guy that averaged like well over 10 yards per target last year. The efficiency or the explosiveness hasn't been there quite the same this year. I think that corrects sooner rather than later. And I think that it starts Saturday against this Florida State team. And another guy I like as far as like explosive production is concerned that also has been getting an awesome amount of volume. And I've always wondered if he would be able to handle it. It's Anthony Schwartz. He came to Auburn as like a track guy, one of like the fastest people in America, not just football players.
Alongside you and I, yes.
Yes. Yeah. So you know how it is. You respect that kind of speed. Mm-hmm. And, we're used to seeing it at Wisconsin. You don't see it at Auburn so much.
Come on. That was so uncalled for.
It was. But he's seen over 10 targets in each of the last couple of weeks. Just crazy speed. Again, this Ole Miss defense is one to pick on. So I think that Schwartz is a really nice call. And then the UNC guys, again, if you're picking up what I'm putting down as far as UNC's offense getting it going against NC State, then De'Ami Brown at 6,200 and Daz Newsome all the way down to 4,300 now. He had 7 targets in each of his last 2 games. I think that eventually it has to work for him. I mean, it's so far off the baseline that he set last year. I mean, unless it was a complete fluke from him last year, which, each passing game that he stinks is a possibility. But going against NC State, I think that this is the get right spot for him. And again, 4,300, like that's a serious way to help save some coin, especially with how many like legit high price options there are on this board. You're going to need some guys around there, and I think that he's clearly the most talented of them. So I'll keep buying on Daz Newsome probably until the season ends.
All right, so Georgia's off this weekend. Where are your eyes going to be primarily?
Oh, and the Ravens are off too. So I have this really weird, relaxing weekend coming up. I don't really know what to do with myself.
Get out to the Bahamas or something?
Yeah, I might not even watch 20 hours of football between Saturday and Sunday. Like I might go visit the alpacas.
Yeah,
it's been a while. Yeah, go see them. Check out. Make sure that they're being socially distant and all that good stuff. But Yeah, I mean, it should be a chill weekend. Again, I think you have it right. That Michigan Minnesota game on Saturday night should be fun. And then I'm sure I'll just kind of like plop down late Saturday night and catch some crazy Mountain West action too. So that'll be fun for all the night owls out there.
All right, so I'll leave you with this. And this, I'm so glad we had video so I can show you this. So my friend of the program, my girlfriend Molly, who recently moved into a new home in the Milwaukee area, and the previous homeowners just like didn't clean out a lot of things. It was a kind of a slop job. I'll say it. I don't know if they're listening, but if you are, what the hell? It was not cool. Like it was there's so many things that were just sloppily done. Nothing that Molly could have done, but they just left things sloppy. And they left a bunch of things in one of the cabinets in the kitchen, including a bottle of Neuropeak.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Greatness by Nature. It's by Zoo brand, ZHOU. Their company slogan is #HowZoo. So I have not taken one of these. I'm kind of scared to take one. All the ingredients listed have like at least 15 letters in each word.
So that's how you know it's good.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I feel like at some point, maybe before next week's podcast, I'll pop one. And we'll just, I think you'll probably be able to tell the difference right away, I would think.
I think so too. And yeah, definitely before the end of the season, we got to have like one Neuropeak episode where we're both just like
we're both peaking.
We're both peaking, yeah, as we're doing the show. That's tremendous. What a find.
It says take one capsule daily, preferably with a meal. So maybe I could take one and then eat a full meal during the podcast. I think that's the only way to go about it.
Eat a beef bouillon.
Just a microwave burrito and just kind of jam it in there.
That's tremendous. Also, randomly, one last thing. When I was in Iowa the other week, remember that viral like chip thing from a couple years ago, like the Pocky hot chip that like comes in like a cardboard coffin?
Oh yeah.
I have one now, and I don't know what to do with it. But let's brainstorm on it. Maybe we'll take some Neuropeak and we can figure out what to do with it with the hot chip.
So how does this correlate to you being in Iowa? Did you acquired it in Iowa?
Yeah, like they just like had them like on the like I don't think Wisconsin allows them or something, but Iowa they have like a full aisle of them. It was at the Hy-Vee. It was crazy.
And these are supposed to be like super super hot.
Yeah, like ruin your day or your week type of hot. Yeah, so I just like have one sitting there. It's like my telltale heart. I need to do something with it. I just don't know what yet.
I am not a hot sauce person or a hot food guy at all. With that said, for the sake of the podcast, I'm absolutely happy to eat that and see how it goes.
All right, we'll figure it out. We'll take some Neuropeak and we'll figure it out.